but let's focus on something that is very rooted in what democracies should actually do, or at least attempt to do. We're thrilled once again to not just have our audience, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more people joining in. There's some housekeeping rules for the audience, which I'll reiterate through the discussion. If there are questions, send them in, write them in. Anil will vet them, I'll curate them, and we'll try to get as many questions as we can. I'll try to keep my questions to the least possible. I'll try to keep my curiosity under control. But we do have three panelists, so we'll dive straight into it. They'll get 10 minutes or so each to present their opening statement. It could be about the wide gamut of what should be the social security plan for all Indians, or anything else that they pick in that cloud, basically. So without any further ado, I'd like to also just start by saying that Policy Circle has now entrusted me with a third discussion, and I'm very grateful for that to the entire team. For those of you who are not familiar with the intricacies of what Policy Circle aims to do, it is a digital platform for informed discussions on economy, policy, and governance. Apart from publishing in-depth articles on these subjects, it also organizes discussions such as the one you're in, involving top thinkers, practitioners on the most pressing issues of the day. Now, once again, we have three panelists. I'm going to introduce them one by one. Dr. Aruna Sharma is a development economist based in Delhi. She's a 1982 batch IAS officer who has served as a secretary in steel and IT ministries of the government of India. She has authored several best-selling books, the latest being Dancing Towards a $5 trillion economy by Holistic Beat. A bureaucrat, she conceived and launched governance softwares like Samagra and GEM. She was a member of the RBI Committee on Digital Payment led by Nandan Nilekani. She has incredibly immense knowledge of the flagship schemes and the PDS system. So we are, we just cannot express how happy we are to have you, ma'am. Dr. Jose Sebastian is on, retired as a professor at the Gulati Institute of Finance and Taxation in Thiruvananthapuram. He's a critique of the statutory pension system, which has created a small privileged class of pensioners while excluding the vast majority of ordinary people. Dr. Sebastian advocates for a comprehensive contributory pension system covering all citizens, which necessitates bringing all statutory pensioners under it. So once again, sir, sorry we're bringing you out of retirement, but we're very happy that you've come out to talk to us. And also Biraj Patnaik ji is with us. I've had him on my show on NDTV a few times. He is the executive director of the National Foundation of India, an organization set up by some visionary leaders to strengthen civil society movements. Biraj was formerly also the principal advisor to the commissioners of the Indian Supreme Court in the right to food case for close to a decade. He has also worked with Amnesty International as its South Asia head. He co-founded the Mithanin Community Health Worker Program that trained and deployed 70,000 health workers in Chhattisgarh, one of those states often ignored. So once again, thanks so much for being on. Dr. Aruna, opening statement, what should be the social security plan for all Indians? All yours.
Thank you so much. And it's my pleasure to share the thing with my co-panelists who have done a lot of research in the sector and quite active in the field. Basically, the issue of concern of social security plan for all Indians, which Anil Nair has correctly flagged for today, is health and education is an out-of-pocket expenses in India. And that is why we need a very strong social security plan, not only at the elder, when person becomes a senior citizen, but also at the young age. And that is creating a lot of pressure. So we have a lot of scattered schemes in name of food security or insurance or pensions for those who are not so well off, or I call it below poverty line or lower middle class. And the problem with India is that you have individuals 20 to 59 years of age who are increasing from 50% to 60% by 2041. So this is the time when they will be doing all their savings for their aging as well as their commitments during their youth. So that's why the pressure comes out very, very strong that do we have any social security plan where one contributes when one is at the earning age and reaps the benefits whenever emergency lands into them. We have comparatively a very, very poor structures. We have seen it during the pandemic. We have seen it when people were hit. And the now constantly low interest rates on the fixed deposits or with the continuity of that when it is going to happen, with instant job losses or cut in salary, which has also happened and exposed everybody the importance of having this social security. So in this scenario, my take is that there should be two kinds of things. For those who need hand-holding, the government should not give a paltry sum of 200 rupees or 300 rupees as a pension for elderly people. There has to be a mechanized insurance-based system where the moment they reach age of 60, they get reasonable amount for the survival, which is supported by the food security and other insurance products. For the middle class and above, it is a very, very difficult thing. And therefore, I have one out of the box proposal that there is a need to have a 12% rate of interest scheme where the money is put with the government for at least 10 years. And that will enable people to earn a good rate of interest for their survival, for meeting out their expenses. And there can be an upper cap of, say, 2 crores of rupees for one household or something like that. Because for the simple reason why I'm talking about this is the people are not spending. If you have seen the results of the last quarter, the demand is not getting generated. And therefore, the growth rate was not what is being expected in the last quarter. So we want people to be confident and to spend. Because if they don't spend, the cycle of growth does not happen, then less jobs, then again this vicious cycle gets triggered completely. Therefore, it is very important to secure their spending in their youth, to meet their commitments of health and education, to meet their commitments of their lifestyle, and then also have a saving of a constant flow of fund in their old age. So I strongly feel in these two gaps, one, with the high interest rates products we must have in the market. It cannot be left to the speculative markets and savings and other things which are now people resorting to, or even crypto for that matter, for getting fast gains, which has happened because of the very low interest rates. So this kind of uncertainty will push people into more these risk short products, which may hit them badly and will sort of hit their lifestyle, will hit their security in their life. So therefore, one secured product of 12% rate of interest, government, it stands to the government interest because they get that liquidity, the demand increases and they spend. So these two kinds of products, I think, is a must for the social security plan, because this does not, otherwise we are heading for serious problem and this democratic dividend may become a liability. Right.
Thank you, ma'am, for that incredibly interesting thoughts. I have so many questions. I'm going to hold off. Let's just get every panelist's thoughts. Dr. Jose Sebastian, all yours. The floor is yours. You can respond to aspects of what ma'am said, but this is the floor for you to say whatever you want to say first.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. Please go ahead.
Oh. Thank you, Aruna madam. I fully agree with you. But I think we should have a comprehensive pension plan which will cover all citizens of the country. Now what happens? The statutory pension is there and it is covered. It covers only a very minuscule percentage of the population. In an article written in Malayalam, I called them the new Brahmins. According to Indian tradition, the responsibility of the state is to protect the Brahmins and cows. So now the statutory pensioners, if you look at the pension burden of states, you will find that the pension burden has become very acute in some of the states like Kerala. In Kerala, 21% of the current revenue is set apart for paying pensions. So my feeling is that unless and until we bring all statutory pensioners within the the now existing NPS, it may not be possible for India to move over to a comprehensive pension system because the statutory pension is going to be a big burden, and it is not contributory. It was started at a time when the life expectancy was only 32 years and the number of government employees was very small and the salary was also very small. Over the years, the salary increased by leaps and bounds because of union activity and all. Life expectancy is now 70 years. So we have the number of government employees have also gone up. Now we have a situation wherein people who drew salary for 30 years are paid half of what they received at the end of their service, along with dearness allowance and periodic revision for another 32 and even to 40 years. So this is not sustainable. Now there is a specious argument that the country has introduced contributory pension from 2004 onwards. If we look at the pension burden, the contributory pension is not going to reduce it significantly, because all people who joined service in 2003 will be coming under statutory pensions and they will be retiring in 2030 or 35. Assuming that they live for another 30 years or even 35 years, this pension burden will be there till end of 2060. So we have to go in for the kind of pension system we have in Western developed countries. There, every citizen is eligible for guaranteed minimum pension and it is contributory. There are statutes which make it mandatory for every citizen to join in a pension fund. So people start contributing towards pension fund when they start working. So it motivates people to take ownership of their destiny. It contributes towards national economic development. But this is not the case in India. NPS is there, but NPS is not mandatory. It is voluntary. So I think we have to have a comprehensive social security system wherein every citizen is encouraged to join a pension fund. And it is not impossible. Now we have the Aadhaar is linked to bank accounts, and with the IT infrastructure, it is possible for every employer and employee to contribute to the pension fund wherever he works or wherever he is employed. So this is possible only by completely overhauling the pension system. It is not possible to keep the statutory pensioners as such. My own sister is a statutory pensioner. She often calls me, I am jealous of statutory pensioners. It is not that. There are many of my friends also alleged me, you are not a pensioner. Unfortunately, I am not a pensioner. I get only the EPF pension. It is a very measly sum. But that is not the issue. The country has to move on to a system wherein social security is ensured to all people. And I think it is quite possible, and there is no point in keeping the statutory pensioners as a small group, as I called the new Brahmins. They also should be brought under the system, and all citizens should be eligible for minimum guaranteed pension. How minimum guaranteed pension is ensured in Western countries? It is by levying high taxes. The tax GDP ratios of most developed countries are around 35%, whereas it is only 17% in India. If we have a social security, a nationwide social security system, it will encourage people to work hard, take ownership of their destinies, save for the, rainy days, and that way it will lead to greater economic development. Now, the statutory pensioners, with their huge pension, are not able to do that. What proportion of their pension reaches the market? Apart from the pension, they are also having their own savings, my sense is that less than 25% of the statutory pension reaches the market. So, on the other hand, if you have a comprehensive social security system having pension for all, immediately it will be reflected in the market. People with 5,000 or 7,000 rupee pension per month, they will take almost the full amount to the market, and it will boost demand, economic activity, and the whole country will benefit. This is my submission. We can have interventions later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I loved your analogy, the Brahmin analogy. It's interesting to me because I was in New York, and the conversation around race and in India, of course, it's about caste, was very heightened, and there's this universal basic income conversation happening there too. So we'll get to that in a bit. But sir, all yours now, Biraj sir. I'd love to see how you got that.
Thank you, Amitoj. I think a lot of conversation that we've had now is about the formal sector and the pensions in the formal sector. But it's very important to look at what is happening in the informal sector. And let's remember that at the time of COVID, particularly 2 years into the pandemic and more now, there is a huge hit. So what Dr. Sharma spoke about really is also a reflection of the demand getting depressed because of the fact that there has been such a huge fall in incomes of the poor over the last 2 years. So if you look at, for instance, the CMI data, it's very clear that 20% of Indians who are poor, the bottom 20%, lost about 53% of the income. That is a 53% decline in their income. Whereas the richest 20% had almost a 40%, 39% in fact, by CMI data, increase in their incomes. And if you look at what Oxfam's inequality report and the global inequality report comes, if you look at that data today, you have almost 57% of the national wealth post-tax with just 10% of the people. Just 10% of the people holding almost 60% of the national wealth, whereas the bottom 13%, the bottom 50%, which is half the population, has only 13% of wealth. So I think this is really the context. And a few days back, I was at a press conference done by the Right to Food campaign, very long-standing campaign, and Dr. Sharma and Jose and others will remember it from their days. They were responsible for the introduction of the NFSA, and also in Madhya Pradesh and other parts of the country, very active. They just concluded a survey of about 7,000 households across the country and 14 states. And what came out very starkly was very similar to the CMI figures, that almost 69% of the people had, particularly in urban areas, it was 69% who had said that there had been a drastic reduction in their income, and the rural households was as high as 47%. And so obviously it's the urban Indians who have been hit most by the lockdowns, because in rural India you still had loosely enforced lockdowns, but in urban areas, in the second and the third wave, even though there was no national lockdown, each state had its own restrictions. So if you were a hotel waiter, or if you were working in a barat ghar or a band, anything that involved any commerce in the hospitality or services sector, you were impacted. So these figures, and of course, the survey, of course, was in a huge range of parameters on the right to food, which I don't want to go in here, but to say that the situation overall is very, very depressing, not just from the economic perspective, but also from the cost that the poor are paying. If you have 40% of people not having a meal or going hungry, we are going back to the pre-National Food Security Act days. Dr. Sharma will remember when there were starvation deaths that she used to deal with as an administrator in Madhya Pradesh or Chhattisgarh or other parts. So we are retreating back to a situation of 20, 22 years ago. And I wouldn't be surprised if we start hearing of starvation deaths in the future as well. Now, in the near future. Now, it is in this context that we have to look at any social security, the architecture, if we talk about it as such. Unfortunately, like this discussion has focused a lot on the formal sector. Even the government's social security code, which was passed by Parliament in 2020, speaks a lot about the organized sector. As Dr. Santosh Mehrotra, in fact, he should have been on this webinar. He's done a lot of work on this. And Santosh and his colleagues in the University of Bath paper have pointed out that out of the 104 pages of the Social Security Code, which was enacted by Parliament in 2020, only 4 pages are devoted to the informal sector. And as we know, the informal sector is almost 94-95% of our total workforce, because our formal sector is very, very low. Just 4 pages out of 104 pages are devoted to them in the SS code. And that's really where we are. So if you look at the welfare architecture, I would again agree with Dr. Jose and Dr. Sharma that if you had to draw out a principle, I think the principle that we should have for any kind of social security measure is universality. Because unless you have a universal pension coverage, and outside of the formal sector, the states provide pension amounts of as low as 200%. When we were Supreme Court commissioners, we used to fight with MORD because the states used to provide a monthly pension to the poor of 75 rupees. And to make it from 75 to 125 rupees took us almost 8-9 years when I was working with Dr. N.C. Saxena and others in the Supreme Court Commission and a number of Supreme Court hearings. And we finally got it. But even today, some states are giving as low as 200 rupees. The southern states, of course, give much more effective pension rates for the poor, are up to 3,000 rupees in states like Tamil Nadu and Kerala. It's 1,000 rupees in Delhi and so on. But the poor states, the so-called aspirational states, which we back in the day used to call the Bimaru states, are giving 200 to 500 rupees, 200 rupees by the state government, 200 rupees by the central government, which is really a pittance. So you can't have. So if you look at social assistance programs, you have disability pensions, you have the old age pensions, and you have maternity entitlements. And even for maternity entitlements and old age pensions, the coverage remains at what is the official poverty line, the Tendulkar poverty line, as defined by the Planning Commission ages back, which is just 22%. So only 22% of India's, of people in India are covered under these schemes. And offtake remains problematic because the implementation of these programs does not reach the ground, as we all know. So therefore, I think when we talk about this welfare architecture, we need to strengthen. Now, let's look at any one of these schemes. Let's take the maternity entitlement scheme, which was formerly called the Janani Suraksha Yojana, but is now called the Pradhan Mantri PMVVY. Now, as per the National Food Security Act, when it was drafted and we got it legislated, the basic demand of most of us who worked on the drafting was that make it a subset of the wage compensation. So if a mother is giving birth to a baby and therefore has to be off work for 6 months or 9 months, give her the minimum wage or a significant proportion of the minimum wage rather than an amount, because government doesn't inflation index most of these pension programs. So this 5,000 was fixed when the NFSA was drawn. It continues. Effectively, it's 6,000, and that too is conditional on your accepting institutional delivery. But that was not met. So you just get a small sum of 5,000 rupees plus 1,000 rupees if you go in for institutional delivery for a very small percentage of mothers in this country. For instance, last year, I think the ministry said that only about 51 lakhs was the coverage under PMVVY. So unless you expand, universalize, even in theory, those programs which are universalized effectively don't reach the poor. If you take the National Food Security Act, which covers 50% of urban poor and 75% of the rural poor, just by way of the fact that you are not using an updated population estimate. When we wrote the act, we had insisted that you should write that it should be an updated population estimate, which is that you had a census in 2001. We are in 2022 now. You are providing a percentage based on the census figures of 2020 of 2001, whereas government has with it provisional estimates for every year. In between two censuses, government uses the provisional estimates. Just by way of that, close to 100 million people are getting excluded. Of course, states are bearing that additional financial burden because many states have expanded the NFSA coverage, but the central government's quota is 100 million less. So I think, the point is that even when there are programs, what is it that we need to strengthen the welfare architecture that we have today? NREG is again a classic example. If you look at the budget this year, in a year of a pandemic where Dr. Sharma has very rightly pointed out, we need a demand side stimulation. And during a crisis like this globally, we saw that every right wing economist was a Keynesian, except in India, where we have effectively cut down. Now, NREG's budget allocation for this year is about 75,000 crores, which is down 34% from the revised estimate of 98,000 crores last year, which means that on an employment front, instead of boosting demand, you actually cut down the budget by 34%. So how is the economy going to recover, let alone provide money into the pockets of people, if we are going to, not make demand side interventions to boost demand. Now, if you look at the global spending during the pandemic, if you take the OECD average, I think it was about 12, close to 12% of the GDP, which was given additional to boost demands in various countries by way of furlough schemes and so on, or other fiscal measures. In India, that was less than 4% of GDP. So, and that included all kinds of things as usual, which are not really translating into money into the pockets of the poor. So, what I want to say is that yes, it's important, but at the heart of everything we do, we must have the poorest of the poor and a universal program which is self-targeting, which allows expanded coverage rather than a limited coverage. Secondly, coming back to my point on urban India being hit bigger in this pandemic than rural India, what we urgently need is something which we used to discuss years ago when the Rural Employment Guarantee Act was, NREG was introduced, that we need a similar program for urban India. Now, what's happening is that because central government has not acted on it, a number of states have started their own programs which cover the urban areas, and typically with a budget of about 100 crores, 150 crores. Rajasthan, day before yesterday or 3 days back, when they passed the state budget, allocated 800 crores, which is the largest urban program you will have. But we need, along the lines of the NREJ, a large urban employment guarantee program to capitalize on the demographic dividend that we speak about. Because if you don't capitalize on it, this soon turns into a nightmare, not just on the economic front, but on the social front, because a lot of the social schisms that are being caused in society today are also happening because a very large section of young people are unemployed. Every unemployed person is a potential rioter or a disruptor on religion or other lines. Of course, governments and fringe groups and governments themselves sometimes encourage these elements, as we are seeing in recent days. But you are creating the societal condition of a Middle Eastern country of say 15 or 20 years back, where they had a demographic dividend, but it got squandered away in a huge way. So I think therefore we need to really seriously impress on the government, because government is so centralized now. There is no structured dialogue between civil society or government anymore in any form. I don't know if there is a structured dialogue between segments of the government and the key decision makers in the government either. But I think we need to impress on the government that unless some of these steps are taken, we are really heading into a disaster on the socio-economic front, as well as on the cultural and social fabric front, where a large number of unemployed people are going to be on the streets, and the poorest of the poor, and particularly those who need these schemes the most, remain vulnerable. So I'll end here and over to you, Anil. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and thank you, Anil and Policy Circle, for inviting me.
No, that's it's our pleasure. Thank you. I'm gonna ask all of you to think about how is it that we're going to find the money for these proposals? And also, what are the political solutions to this? Because it's one thing to say that these are the schemes that we should have, the comprehensive or the otherwise, thought out. But it's difficult to literally think about how we're going to find the money to roll out these schemes. So, Arnaji, with that thought in mind, you can probably answer that. But there's another question that I want to, accommodate, because I just want to encourage the idea of questions from everyone as they're writing them down. Just keep in mind what I said about finding the money. What Jacob has asked of you is that will the fixed interest secure product be secure enough to offset fears of people about the uncertainty of inflation? He goes on to give context and says, isn't it better to link this fixed interest in some way to inflation so that despite being fixed, some relief is available during severe inflation? And that's something Biraj actually touched upon. So, his point is a larger point, that there is a fixed interest scheme which is not linked to inflation. Uh, you know, People will be tempted to go to other schemes which are better adjusted to inflation. And he gives the example of schemes linked to share prices or the purchase of gold or crypto. Hence, he says, in my humble opinion, if you want a fixed interest scheme to succeed and be adopted widely, then it should be in some way linked to inflation. What do you think?
Absolutely right. I'll take both parts of your questions together. I'll take the first part as to where is the fund. Let me tell you, money is the least of the problem that we have. Our problem is we must put the food where the mouth is, and that is where we suffer the problem. If you look at it, in a district for development, we are spending not less than 1,200 crores per annum. That doesn't include salary or what Jacob mentioned, the pension. It is just for the growth. An average size of population of a district is around 15 lakhs of people. So if we provide top class of infrastructure, definitely we are going to create a lot of jobs. So that is very important where the money goes. And if you do a micro analysis, what we call it as a badly administered state, even if I give a discount for the corruption, their utilization of this fund is 50%, 60%, right? So in the sense, they don't even have a capability to absorb the fund and trigger the growth. So that is the difference between a well-governed state and a badly governed state, or a well-governed district and a badly governed district. So it is very important that money is the least of the issue. Now, whether we want to earmark the part of the money as a government contribution and part contribution from the people, yes, it is possible in the organized sector, which is happening under the pension schemes. What Jose was talking about, these pensioners of the government, it was actually the philosophy behind this was a deferred salary. The salary was fixed lesser than the market salaries, and this was deferred looking at their longevity, that it will be paid to them later in the life in the form of pension. So when the salary enhancement happened in a big way, then at that time from 2004 onwards, this has been stopped. So they are no longer subjected to this, and they are subjected to the contributory pension. Now, if you look at the contributory pension, I totally agree that it is only restricted to the organized sector. And during COVID, the amount of withdrawal you found under this pension scheme is something also an eye opener, because in distress they have deep dived rather, into their savings. So, in the sense, they have put the future at the cost of the present survival. And that is what has created a lot of problem. So, when we are talking about it, it is very important, because either we take care of the health, top quality health and education as is happening in the developed world, at the cost of the government, so that it does not become an out of pocket expenses. And if we expect a saving and earnings to spend on it, then definitely this kind of a guarantee is possible. Now that if our focus is on those 50% of the population who needs hand holding in terms of food security, in terms of ensuring that they get wage employment through Manrega or urban Narega, whatever way we want to go about it, or they want to trigger the self-employments or get into the business or skilling, whatever it is, that is where the government's funding has to come. But for the rest of them, India was known for saving. What Jacob is talking about, linking with the inflation and tax, if you look at it, we used to have a huge amount of small savings, and it was the money available for the government to carry on their wage, their expenditure balancing, and that used to go a very long way. Now even those schemes are having very low rate of interest, so people are not investing there, and they've gone more and more into the speculative markets. And that kind of a hit, whether Indian middle class will be in a position to take or not, the future will tell. Some may be very badly hit, some may not be badly hit, some may be able to overcome. Because if you look at the number of suicides which are happening because of the monetary reasons, that is also going up. So not any other reason, because of monetary issues. So these are the matter of concerns, because we don't have that inbuilt of the insurance coverage. So if we are talking of the universal sort of a pensioning, and we expect a contribution, then it has to be linked to the inflation index, as Jacob has said, so that we are able to give a good amount of money which is responsible, which will take care of their decent survival. Or to what I am proposing, to a higher rate of interest of 12%, which is much above the market rates today. And even if we retain at 12%, at least 10 to 20 years, we will be able to hold on. And then again, it may be revised as per the inflation and go up. So you will have these people, because I was really surprised to see many of the young middle class or higher middle class, rather I'll say, who withdrew their children from good schools, who left their rented homes because they couldn't afford. One of the members of the spouse lost the job, or somebody's salary was cut, so they reduced their standard of living, or their priorities, or their spending, which is my major concern, completely. And after that shock, they have gone into minimalistic. So, in the sense, the demand is becoming low and low and low and low, which a country like India cannot afford. We want this cycle to continue. So, therefore, the strong social security for those who are in unorganized sector and those who are in the organized sector has to be two formulae. Something, a good rate of investments for them, the amount which will be available to the government in terms of small savings at a higher rate of interest. Plus, of course, if we are able to come up with a universal product, nothing like it. Nothing like it. Because today, if we are talking about the food security, yes, we have achieved, but only on food grains. Our malnutrition figures are equally bad today, right? So in the sense, we have to do the balancing thing, and the fear is, this demographic dividend is becoming a liability. We have on streets this huge number of unemployed people who are unskilled, who are not employable. If I put it bluntly, they're just not employable by any sector, truthfully speaking. So what are we going to do with that lot? And how are they going to fend with themselves? Because the lands are becoming small, the productivity enhancement may be able to sail them through, or they will end up being vagabonds on the streets. So if we are talking of social security, which the policy circle has correctly flagged at the right time, that it is important for India to come up with a robust social security kind of a system when we are going ahead.
Sorry, ma'am, I had two short questions. One was at the start, you said it's got nothing to do with the money. Could you clarify? You're saying that it's a matter of the will?
Surely, it is a matter of the will and how you prioritize the money. So much of money is going to the places where it is not desirable. If you try to combine all that money, we can easily take care of this. Whether you call it as a direct benefit support, or whether you call it as a futuristic saving, or creating a kitty, it is possible. It is possible to do that, because we are only 25 crores or 30 crores of households, right?
Okay.
So out of 30 crores of households, 25%, if I take them to be taken as a below poverty line, which needs complete household, the others will come up in the more contributory lot. And it is possible to do that. It is not that it is impossible.
If it
And
is
money
possible,
wise, if you do the arithmetic, it is possible to take that kind of a money.
sorry to interrupt. If it is possible, why exactly is it not happening in your opinion?
It is because it is not in the priority list at all. Let me put it
Why
that
is
way.
it not in the priority list?
Yes, because we thought that people can fend for themselves if we give them food security. And when the rights agenda was very much in vogue, at that time, right to work, right to food security was thought as end in all. And these pension schemes were brought in for the old age, for scholarships for the children of people who are below the poverty line and everything. And we were under the boom of 91, 92 when economy was opening up. Nobody was thinking of a shot. So you had the educated people making their money and making their savings and able to sail through it. It is the COVID which has literally shook up the whole thing, and we have to reset our priorities.
But ma'am, at the time that these schemes were put in, were we in a position to provide something like universal basic income or social security for all Indians?
Absolutely, because if you look at it, at that time when 500 rupees was thought of, many of the state governments added money to it, and they're still adding. Like the southern states, if they are giving 3,000 rupees or 3,500 rupees, they are giving to these elderly people. And with DBT coming, it is directly reaching them. So pilferages has also reduced considerably. Since 2012, we are into DBT. So that has made the whole difference. The first time we got, you'll be surprised to know, I was involved in that. Manrega was the first one we put on the DBT because that enabled to link all the IT systems because the
Right.
transactions were too many, two variants and everything, and that is how the bridges were built. So if you look at it, it is possible to do it, and we
Right.
are having state governments who are topping up the money of the central government. Manrega also last year when the need was there, the budgetary requirement went up to 93,000 crores, which might have been reduced, but it's a demand base. So they will have to
Yeah.
increase if the
They'll
demand
increase
increases.
it. The
Yeah,
finance
yeah.
minister has
So
mentioned
that's
that
how it
several
goes.
times. Yeah,
So in
she
the sense, if need be, that provisioning is possible.
right.
Only thing is, if we do it in a systematic way instead of knee-jerk, it is going to make a lot of difference.
Understood. Okay, Dr. Jose, if it is possible, let's take that as something perhaps I would assume even you'd agree. Then, if it has to be done in a systematic way, how would you propose it should be done? Since we've already agreed that the money can be found for these schemes, the comprehensive one that you mentioned and any other that was talked about.
Yes, I fully agree with Dr. Aruna. It is possible. We have the funds. Professor Biraj Patnaik made an estimate, and according to him, if we levy 2% wealth tax, we will be able to mobilize resources sufficient enough to pay 7,500 rupees pension. But we have to deepen people's understanding of these issues. That is the problem. Our constitution has enough powers to tax people and take care of them. But now the tax GDP ratio is still hovers around 17%. If we raise it to maybe 20%, enough resources will be available. Then we have to make it contributory. Every working person has to contribute towards the pension funds. That should be made compulsory, whether it be a daily wagerer, migrant laborer, or wherever he works. For example, we have 35 lakh migrant laborers in Kerala. Kerala has certain plans for the migrant labor. Of course, we call them guest workers, not migrant labor. So these guest workers should be, included under a pension system, wherein he has a number. It is covered under the national information system, and the employer also has to contribute. It may not be possible for all people to contribute sufficient money to get a minimum guaranteed pension. Then the government has to come in. Government has to put in money to ensure that all people, whether they are eligible for a minimum guaranteed pension or not, they get a minimum guaranteed pension. For this purpose, a national legislation should be enacted, making it compulsory for both employers and employees to be part of the pension system. Once, center introduces such a legislation, I am sure the states will follow suit. And if majority of the states go for that, within 10 or 15 years, we will have a fully covered national pension system.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that. I think my greatest takeaway was the 2% wealth tax that you talked about as the solution to finding that money and doing it systematically. I I noticed that Biraj, you were ready to say what you are going to say, and I'm happy that you will be unleashing that on us right now. But I'm going to try something new. I'm going to put you in the government's shoes. You've been listening into this discussion. This is a hypothetical situation. You've been listening into this situation. You have a position that has been given by the Prime Minister to you, wherein you can actually decide whether this plan is to be put in. Would you do it or not? And if not, why?
So I would absolutely do it, and I would add to what Dr. Sharma and Joseph said. Number one, there is already a lot of money available, let's say, for construction workers. You know, 2% of all tax that is collected from builders. Where is that money? It's lakhs of crores literally lying in government deposits, where states who have collected the money have not spent it. Now, if you go to the Construction Welfare Board meetings in Delhi, the only discussions that happen is how do we invest this money better? Whereas this money was collected to create facilities on the work site, to build creches, to provide for disability or death in case of accidents. So there is a chunk of money that's already available that's not being used, that is lying with state governments in the urban sector. Number one. Number two, in addition to the wealth tax, you can have a financial transaction tax, and you can proportionally tax speculative investments at a higher rate for every transaction that is done as otherwise. So what that would do is it would ensure that people contribute to it directly and indirectly. And I would definitely, as government, introduce it. I don't think it is going to stop investments. It is going to ensure that you have a pool. Third, I would look at,
yeah, sorry, I just want to pause you there because see, the point is that first you put the young population, the people between the ages of 20 to 50 in a situation where they feel that they have to take crypto kind of risks, and then you tax them on speculative the most. Isn't that a bit unfair?
no,
I
it's
mean, I
not.
agree with what you're saying, but this is what's happened,
See,
right?
I'll tell you why it is not unfair is because the returns that you get on this, if you are a young, I mean, firstly, young people are not saving. You know, that is all the evidence that we have. They are spending, and therefore it's important to put money in their hands. And therefore, but you know, when you talk of young people, you're talking of a very, very tiny proportion of young people who can go into cryptos or into other speculative or saving products. 99% of our young people are struggling for a job. And as Dr. Sharma said, Arunaji said, they are unemployed and also unemployable. And that's the second point I was coming to.
Please go ahead. Sorry about that. Yeah.
If I was government, that is exactly my target segment. Because if I do not address this problem, then I have, you know, a huge amount of social problems that are going to crop up in the coming days. So I would definitely introduce a urban guarantee scheme, employment guarantee scheme, which is linked to skill building. And you know, Professor Jean Drèze has suggested a whole what he calls a duet, where you use this employment guarantee scheme to promote skills that people can use and create a livelihood for themselves rather than be on the streets protesting. So I would definitely use the money from a financial transaction tax or a 2% wealth tax to do that. Second, I would ensure that we free up the money that is being collected as cess for unorganized sector urban workers and is lying with state governments. I would certainly mop that up to ensure that you have a scheme or a program statewide which actually utilizes this money productively, either through benefits to those workers themselves who've been part of programs that has been contributed, or to create worker welfare programs just state specific. Third, you know, if you look at even countries like Brazil, forget the West, forget unemployment insurance, or you know, we are a long way away from all of that, or a basic income to all citizens. But in a country like Brazil, if you employ a household help, for instance, to help you, like most of us in India do in the middle classes, you have to mandatorily register them. You have to mandatorily pay them 13 months' wages, of which 1 month's wages goes directly into a contributory pension fund for them. We are not able to enforce anything like this. You know, we don't want to build it because somehow the welfare for the poor is seen as a burden that should not be put on others. But that is not how any society moves. So it is absolutely essential. We are unable to even ensure minimum wages are paid. If Delhi minimum wages are higher or get higher because the local government, state government increases it, immediately employers register their workers in Noida or in Gurgaon, where the minimum wages are lower, and give them letters from there so that they don't have to pay Delhi minimum wages. So we have become a society. Why was there so much opposition to NREGA when we worked on that, and when Dr. Sharma and others were working on that ages back? The opposition was primarily because farmers did not want to pay agricultural labor the minimum wages. They were threatened because they felt if the state gives a minimum wage, then they will not be, the middle and the large farmers will not be able to get labor at rates which are close to slavery rates, which the pittance that they were getting and the conditions of near slave labor that you had in states like Punjab, particularly from migrants from UP and Bihar, which has dramatically changed because of NREJ. Because NREJ has boosted rural demand, and it was responsible for the growth that we saw immediately for almost 5-6 years. The pickup in rural demand, the increase in wages across sectors which NREJ pushed was really dramatic, and we need to do that. And the last thing I would do, picking up on what Jose and Dr. Sharma said, is that I would also look at the deficits in current programming on food security. For instance, it will not cost me much uh, to introduce. It's about 7,000-8,000 crores to introduce a breakfast in the midday meal scheme across the country. So that, because it will cut on early morning hunger, it will increase learning outputs, and it's a no-brainer. It's cheap, it's doable, it can be implemented because the infrastructure is already there for the midday meal. I would provide, at the very minimum, 1 kilo of pulses at least, and 1 liter of cooking oil at the very minimum. And states will then supplement it to every person in this country under the National Food Security Act, which is currently giving only food grains. We are meeting the calorie deficit to some extent. We are not meeting the protein deficit. That can be easily covered by providing oil and pulses, and then states can supplement it. Somebody can give eggs or whatever else they want. But switching to more nutritious foods like millets, these are no-brainers. It doesn't cost much. States are already doing it. And in the immediate term, I hope that the Pradhan Mantri Khadya Suraksha Yojana, which is now providing the special scheme where you're getting food rations. I mean, for heaven's sake, I would ensure that it is not stopped after the UP elections or the current round of elections, but continues at least till December. Because please understand that one of the things that came out in the Right to Food survey is the fact that most people have stopped taking gas cylinders in urban areas and rural areas, refills, because of the cost. And you are talking about, we are heading towards the days when we will be talking about the dream time when Brent crude was $100 a barrel. And you are looking at, if the war continues and sanctions in Russia kick in, you might go to $150 a barrel, which is a frightening scenario for inflation. And it is going to throw the government's fiscal deficit calculations, which have been made at $90 a barrel, completely haywire. So it is absolutely essential, therefore, to factor all of this in. And I would, as a policymaker, take a medium-term view rather than a short-term reduce the fiscal deficit for now view, because that is just the recipe of disaster that we are heading for now.
Okay, wow. Yeah, a tornado of thoughts. Thanks. Okay, we're completely out of time, but what we'll do is we'll give our speakers closing comments, just about a minute each, if that's okay. If you want to take more, of course, feel free to. But I guess the question that I would have as a closing comment that you could address and think about is, and Jacob, I do see your question, but those are thoughts and less of a question. So I'm going to hold off on that. I want to put in the question that I think is pertinent to the flow of the communication right now. How do you really get the political buy-in for this move? I mean, how do you make it happen? It's not just about convincing the leadership, whichever government it is in power, whether it's state or national or Congress or BJP or somebody else. How do you just make that happen? That political buy-in that they actually said, let's not think about all the problems that are there that are going to potentially come in, the amount of changes that we'll need to put in place, all of that, just the same way they did demonetization with that kind of political will, why can't they do this? How do you get that political buy-in? Arunaji, that's for you first, as a closing comment.
Right, thank you. And thank you for the wonderful analysis done by my both co-panelists as we went ahead with it. There is a lot of funds available in terms of cess. You have education cess, huge amount lying, which is yet to be unleashed. And you have for this NOFIN for electric connectivity, internet connectivity. So that is also lying. So in the sense, we are sitting on this pile of funds lying at different places. And therefore, when you ask a question of political buying, slowly it is changing that this kind of a strong social security network is a must. And that's why you are finding many of the state governments have taken that initiative and already started. And if the voting pattern starts going towards governance than other trivial issues, that is the way the political buying is going to happen. Because that is the biggest weapon anybody has got. And if the voting shifts into this as an agenda, or this care of the people as an agenda, or the priority of the people requirement as an agenda, then definitely you will have political buying for these issues. There is absolutely no problem on it. And it is not that we have a past history for this, because we came out from famine and then we went for the connectivity of the roads and quadrilateral schemes and everything where, the priority went for infrastructure. Then we had opening up of economy. All these things have happened as more political buying because the demand was there, and then, it just triggered off. So it is possible, and we have successful examples across the state. And I always say that any experiment done in the state is much well ironed out because they remove a lot of bugs. If I look from the IT language, they remove all the bugs and it is all ready for replication for an adaptation by the other state governments. So we do have these good examples lying down, and we do try to brush it off, saying that their state GDP is better than other states, but other states is getting so much of grant and they are not using it. So those who are brushing it off, they need more of introspection than anything else. So it is very important that I think the time has come to have a political buying for this, because if we miss these years, it is going to head for to create a more problematic situation to handle the youth and to employ the youth as we go ahead. So I think we can't afford to delay this issue, and better we build the cat now.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Jose, you heard the question. Please give your closing comment.
I think we need to educate the whole society. In fact, I am doing little bit of experiment in this respect. I brought out a small booklet containing 22 questions on universal pension. And I printed 1,000 copies. I distributed to all MLAs, MPs in Kerala, major political party executives, members, and all. So I'm also writing in newspapers about universal pension and its, and its necessity. And it is somehow, it is getting into the minds of the people. I have attached it to a sense of justice. The society should have a sense of justice. Then, once it is inculcated in society, it will be easy to communicate to the political class and also to ordinary people. So, a lot of groundwork needs to be done, and I really congratulate Mr. Anil for taking this issue seriously and organizing this program. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. I'm sure Anil sir will communicate his how grateful he is about you saying that. Biraj, let's see if you got.
Just take half a minute,
Yeah,
because we are 3 minutes over time. But I would say I completely endorse what Dr. Sharma was saying, that people have to vote with their feet and vote governments out, which are delivering what one would call no vision, only television kind of governance. they have to go beyond the PR and the spin and the Hindu, Muslim and Mandir Masjid and focus on the issues that matter. So I'm very hopeful that on March 10th, a message will be delivered from the states that are in elections. If people are happy, they will vote for the incumbent governments. If they are not, they will put them out. And I think that is the message that we need. And if people are happy with what is happening and they want this kind of governance, well, then, that's what democracy is about. But there is no weapon more potent than people's vote. And I think our job as civil society, as concerned citizens, is to ensure that people know what are the issues and not get diverted. And I think that's really the challenge structurally in this post-truth era of fake news and WhatsApp University, is to keep the spotlight on the real issues and not on imagined schisms on the basis of caste, religion, or other things. So thank you very much, Amitoj, for this wonderful facilitation, and thank you, Anil, for bringing us all together. I've really enjoyed the discussion and looking forward to your other webinars.
Thank you, everyone. Anil sir, any closing thoughts? You got to unmute yourself. Anil sir, you got to unmute yourself. You're muted. Sorry.
I think we have overshot the time. No, 1 hour time we had given for the discussion. I would just like to thank you. It was really enlightening, the kind of comments that came. I hope today, surprisingly, there aren't too many people in the audience. But the idea is to create a kind of discussion for our YouTube channel. That was the idea.
Okay.
So anyway, thank you all the panelists. Thank you, Amitoj, for doing this wonderful discussion.
Anytime. Thank you, Anil, and thank you, everyone. Please reach out to me or anyone on the panel if you have more questions. Once again, it's a pleasure to be able to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Jose.
Bye-bye.
Great, Anil Nair. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Bye.